On my hospital bed, after giving this man 20 years of my life, my husband leaned over and whispered, "Grace, you've never been enough. Vanessa has more money, more charm, more of everything than you." His words cut deeper than the IV in my arm. He thought I was weak, broken, disposable, but what he didn't know was that I had been quietly building a $750 million empire in silence, and in the next few minutes, the world he thought he controlled was about to collapse. Grace's chest rose slowly. The machines beeped beside her. She had fought storms before, but nothing like this. Years of sacrifice, years of love, all dismissed with a single cruel whisper. Imagine, lying on a hospital bed, body frail, heart aching, and the man you trusted most chooses that moment to mock you, to replace you. It is a wound no medicine can heal. But Grace was not the fragile woman David believed. She was about to show him, and the world, who she truly was. Stay with this story, because what happens next will shatter every lie and reveal a truth that no betrayal can bury. If you've ever felt underestimated, keep watching. This story may feel like yours too. David's lips curled into a cold smile. He thought Grace was weak, helpless. To him, she was a broken wife with nothing left to give. "Stop pretending," he muttered. "Vanessa will take care of me now. You are finished." Grace stayed still, her breath shallow but her mind sharp. She looked at him, steady, unafraid. "David," she whispered, "call the nurse. Ask her to bring me my bag." He frowned. "What bag?" "The gray one. There is an envelope inside." He laughed, a bitter sound. "You want your knitting club receipts? You're not making sense." Grace kept her voice calm. "It is important. Please." The nurse entered. She checked the monitors, then handed Grace the small gray bag. Grace's fingers trembled as she pulled the zipper. Inside, a sealed envelope with her name in gold. David folded his arms, smirking. "What is this? A letter from church? Grocery lists?" Grace slid her finger under the seal. Her eyes never left his face. "Read it," she said softly. For the first time that night, his smirk faltered. David snatched the page from her hand. He scanned the lines with casual arrogance. But then, his face drained of color. He read the numbers again. $750 million. Her name, her trust, her control. His lips moved, but no sound came. The paper shook in his hands. It was as if his pride had fallen and shattered on the floor. Grace watched him silently. Years of silence had taught her patience. This was the moment silence turned into power. You hid this from me?" David whispered. Grace's voice was steady. "I protected it from greed." The machines in the room beeped, steady and calm. But inside David's chest, panic grew. Everything he believed about her was gone. The quiet wife he mocked was the owner of an empire. David's hand trembled. His arrogance cracked into fear. For the first time in their marriage, he stood small in front of her. Grace closed her eyes for a moment. She remembered her mother's voice. "Be kind. Pay attention." Her kindness had built wealth, and now it would protect her. Long before the hospital room, Grace came from a small town in Ohio. The streets flooded with mud whenever it rained. The school roof leaked. The church pantry often stood empty. Her mother, Helen, was a nurse. Her laugh could heal as much as her medicine. She taught Grace 2 rules: be kind and pay attention. Because kindness is the only medicine you can give without a license, and people always reveal who they are if you listen long enough. Her father, Thomas, was a mechanic. Big, patient hands. He taught her to fix what she could, and save what she could not spend. They had little, but it was enough. Enough for 1 new book each month. Enough to keep the lights on most nights. Enough to help neighbors when their pantry was empty. Grace grew up quiet. She stayed after class to stack chairs. She noticed how teachers spoke. She noticed who picked up trash and who dropped it. She saw that power was not always loud. These lessons became her armor. Not of steel, but of kindness, patience, and sharp eyes. In college, Grace studied numbers. Numbers never lied. People lied. Fear lied. But numbers stood honest. After graduation, she worked at a small startup. The company was sinking. Cash gone, bills piled high. Grace asked the founder for a chance. "Give me the vendor list," she said. "Let me renegotiate." At first he laughed, but he gave her the list. 2 weeks later, she saved the company $30,000. When the company survived, the founder shook her hand. "You saved us," he said. Grace shook her head. "No, kindness saved you. You paid your bills when you could. People remembered." That lesson stayed with her. Trust was more valuable than profit. One honest brick at a time, she built her wall. Her quiet success grew. Investments in small firms, medical gloves, water filters, software for hospitals, not glamorous, but solid. Not loud, but lasting. By the time she met David, she was already building, but she never spoke of it. She wanted love, not admiration. She believed in marriage, not money. She did not know then that her silence would one day save her. Grace met David at a friend's wedding. The night was warm, filled with laughter and yellow roses. He was tall, charming, the kind of man who made people turn when he entered a room. He made everyone laugh that night. He made Grace feel seen. They talked for hours. He loved how she listened. She loved how he dreamed. 2 years later, they married in a small garden. Only close friends, family, and a violinist playing too fast. The day was simple, but to Grace, it was perfect. David held her hand as if he would never let go. In those early years, he was kind. He brought her tea in the morning. He left notes with little hearts on the fridge. He told her that her calm made him brave. She believed him. She wanted to. Grace thought she had found not just a husband, but a partner. She trusted him with her heart. She trusted that love was enough. For Grace, money was quiet. Love was loud. And in that quiet, she allowed herself to rest. She could not know then that the love she built would one day be tested by fire. The first cracks came slowly. David lost his job. He blamed his boss. He made a risky trade. He blamed the market. Dinner was too salty. He blamed the salt shaker. Little by little, the man she married began to change. The notes on the fridge disappeared. The tea in the morning stopped. His smile turned sharper, his words colder. He craved more. Expensive watches, weekend trips to places where the water was the color of new sky. He wanted to feel tall, even if it meant standing on her shoulders. Grace did not argue. She let him spend. She let him boast. She chose silence over conflict. Her mother's words whispered in her mind. People tell you who they are if you listen long enough. And Grace listened. She listened to the excuses. She listened to the laughter that no longer reached his eyes. She listened to the sound of a love thinning into habit. The woman, who once believed marriage was stronger than money, began to feel the weight of her own quiet doubts. She did not speak them, not yet, but the silence between them was no longer peace. It was the seed of a storm. It was late October. The trees burned with red and gold. Grace had stayed late at a meeting, reviewing contracts, reading numbers. The road home was slick with rain. A truck ignored a red light. Its headlights cut through the darkness like a predator. Grace turned the wheel. Glass shattered. The world spun. When she opened her eyes, everything smelled of antiseptic and lemon. Beeping machines. White curtains. Pain. Doctors told her she had been lucky. Her body needed rest, but she would heal. She was alive. David visited that first night. He held her hand. He kissed her forehead. He called her his brave girl. He brought flowers, big ones, the kind that looked expensive. For a moment, Grace believed they were still a team, that the accident had brought him back. But days have a way of pulling truth into the open. The silence between them was no longer healing. It was hiding. And in that silence, betrayal was waiting to step into the light. On the third day in the hospital, David arrived late, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes tired, and on him lingered a perfume Grace did not wear. He pulled out his phone. He smiled at it like it loved him back. Grace asked softly, "How are you sleeping?" He shrugged. "Vanessa thinks I worry too much." The way he said her name told Grace everything. She did not argue. She listened. Nurses talk. Hallways carry sound. Rumors travel faster than medicine. A friend sent her a photo. David at a rooftop bar. A woman with red lipstick leaned close, their shoulders touching. The caption, "Late Night Smiles." Grace stared at the screen. She did not feel rage. She felt sadness, deep and steady. The kind of sadness that makes you want to hold a stranger's hand just to remember you are still here. Her mother's words returned. Be kind. Pay attention. So Grace did. She paid attention, and every detail cut sharper than glass. The hospital's cameras confirmed the rumors. David slipped in past midnight. He left before dawn. He was always tired in the morning, always busy when doctors asked to speak with them both. When he spoke, it was in half sentences. "You'll be fine. I've got meetings. Don't stress." On the 6th day, he leaned over Grace's bed, and he said the words that burned everything to ash. "Vanessa is richer than you now. She will take care of me the way you never could." He smiled as if standing on a hill she could never climb. He told her a story where she was small and he was the winner. Grace turned her head to the window. She watched the light touch the long white curtains. Her body weak, but inside her, something stood tall. She had been quiet for years, gentle for years. But betrayal has a way of waking what silence hides. Her voice was soft but steady. "David, please call the nurse. Bring me my bag." He frowned. "For what?" "For the envelope inside." And the world began to shift. David stood taller beside her bed, his voice dripping with pride. "Vanessa will take care of me," he said. "She has more class, more money, more power. With her, I have a future." His words landed like stones, one after another. For years, Grace had built silently, thinking love was enough. Now he mocked her as if she were nothing. Grace breathed slowly. Her fingers trembled, but her eyes stayed calm. She opened the envelope and slid the page toward him. "Read it," she whispered again. David rolled his eyes but snatched the paper. He skimmed the lines, then froze. $750 million. Her trust, her name, her control. His face turned pale. His hands shook. The smile that once carried confidence crumbled into disbelief. Grace leaned back against the pillows, her body weak, but her spirit steady. She had carried this secret for years, and now, in the moment of betrayal, the truth had become her shield. David whispered the numbers under his breath, as though repeating them could change reality, but reality had already shifted. Grace was no longer the woman he mocked. She was the woman who held everything. The door opened with a quiet creak. Mr. Harris stepped in, tall and calm, a folder under his arm. He had been Grace's lawyer for years, silent but loyal. "Good morning, Mrs. Williams," he said, nodding gently. "Forgive the intrusion, but there is something urgent." David spun toward him. "What is this? Why are you here?" Harris opened the folder, his tone even. "This morning, the bank alerted us. Someone attempted to transfer funds from your joint account to a new account not in your name." He looked at David. "The bank flagged it. The account has been frozen." David's mouth opened, then closed. He stammered, That's a mistake, a mix-up." Harris gave no expression. "I advised the bank to halt everything until Mrs. Williams confirmed." Grace's heart ached, not from shock but from confirmation. Her husband had not only betrayed her love, he had tried to steal her life's work. David's voice rose, desperate. "You can't do this! You can't just—" Grace lifted her hand, silencing him. "Yes, David. He can, because I asked him to." The air in the room grew heavy. The balance had shifted, and David was losing ground fast. News travels fast, especially when scandal tastes rich. Within hours, the story spread beyond hospital walls. CNN flashed the headline, "Billionaire betrayed on hospital bed." Fox News added fuel, "Quiet wife hides fortune, mocked by husband's mistress." Reporters swarmed the entrance of St. Mary's. Cameras snapped. Questions shouted. Grace's name filled the airwaves. Not as the soft woman in the background, but as the hidden billionaire who stunned everyone. Nurses whispered in hallways. Doctors glanced into her room longer than before. Even strangers on social media debated her life as if they knew her. David hated the attention. He craved spotlight when it praised him, but this spotlight burned. He sat in the corner, pale and restless, as the world painted him a fool. Grace lay quietly, breathing slow, letting the storm unfold. She never wanted fame, but fame had found her, and while the world gossiped, she stayed calm. Because she knew, truth had only begun to surface. The story was no longer private. It was public. And once the public tasted betrayal, they demanded more. Grace's silence was power, her dignity stronger than any headline. The door swung open without warning. Vanessa Moore stepped inside, wearing a red dress that burned against the white walls. Her lips curved into a smirk. In her hand, a phone raised high, its camera already rolling. Live. "Hello, Grace," she said sweetly. Her voice dripped with mock sympathy. "It's time the world hears the truth, don't you think?" David leapt from his chair. "Vanessa, stop! Not here!" But she ignored him. She faced Grace, eyes sharp, smile brighter than glass. "You thought you could hide forever, but I'll show them everything." The nurse gasped. Mr. Harris frowned, stepping closer. But Vanessa's confidence filled the room. On the screen of her phone, thousands of hearts flickered. Comments scrolled fast. The audience was already watching. Grace looked at her calmly, her body weak, but her eyes steady. She had seen storms before. This was only another. Vanessa laughed, tilting her phone toward Grace's face. "Smile, darling. Your empire is about to crumble." But Vanessa did not understand. The camera might catch Grace's image. It would never capture her strength. And in that moment, the real battle began. The room felt smaller, with Vanessa's laughter echoing through it. David shifted nervously, torn between the two women. Harris stood silent, waiting for Grace. Grace's voice rose, not loud, but clear. "Money is not armor," she said. "Character is." Vanessa's smirk faltered. For a heartbeat, silence pressed the room. Even the machines seemed to pause between beeps. Grace's words cut deeper than anger. They were calm, but sharp. They were truth spoken without fear. David looked at her, his mouth half open. For the first time he saw the woman he had underestimated. Not weak, not disposable, strong. Vanessa scoffed, trying to regain her mask. "Oh, please. Character doesn't pay bills. Money does." Grace met her gaze, unflinching. "Then you will never understand why I'm still standing. Because I built with kindness, and kindness outlives greed." The live stream kept rolling. Viewers typed furiously, taking sides. Some mocked, some cheered. But Grace did not care. Her strength was no longer hidden. It was spoken, and no camera, no mistress, no betrayal could erase it. The war for truth had only begun, and Grace was ready to fight it. The tension in the room was sharp enough to cut. Then the door opened again. Helen, Grace's mother, stepped inside, her old nurse's badge still clipped to her coat, her eyes steady, her voice calm. She looked once at Vanessa, once at David, and then at her daughter. Her words carried the weight of decades. "Is anyone bleeding?" she asked the nurse. "No, ma'am," the nurse answered softly. Helen nodded. "Then the only emergency here is moral." The room went still. Even Vanessa's smirk trembled for a moment. Helen moved closer to Grace's bed. She placed her hand gently on the rail, like a shield. Her presence filled the space, quiet but unshakable. David shifted uncomfortably, his excuses drying up on his lips. Vanessa rolled her eyes, but she did not laugh this time. Grace looked at her mother, and for the first time since the accident, she felt stronger than her pain. The battle was no longer hers alone. Her mother stood beside her, and together they were not easy prey. What Vanessa thought was a victory was about to become something else entirely. The air was heavy with silence. Then, without warning, the fire alarm screamed. A red light flashed above the door. The siren echoed down the hallway. Nurses shouted. Shoes squeaked on polished floors. Patients groaned in fear. The administrator rushed in. "Protocol requires evacuation," he said quickly. But Grace stayed calm. Her eyes scanned the room. No smoke, no heat, no flames. She shook her head. "This is not fire," she whispered. "This is fear." David's voice cracked. "That's ridiculous." He looked around nervously, but his hands betrayed him, twitching with panic. Vanessa lifted her phone, smirking again. "Maybe the building really is burning," she teased. "You don't want to die hugging a piece of paper, do you?" Grace stared at her with quiet pity. "No, Vanessa, I don't want to die hugging a lie." The alarm shrieked. The nurses hesitated, but Grace's calm cut through the noise. Someone had pulled the alarm to break her resolve. But the only thing breaking was their plan. The alarm finally stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise. Vanessa's phone still glowed in her hand. She tilted it forward, a wicked smile curling her lips. "Since we're all being honest today," she purred, "let's show the world what I've been saving." She tapped the screen. A video began to play. The grainy clip showed Grace, pale in her hospital bed, her voice weak, her trust revealed. David gasped. The nurse covered her mouth. Even Harris froze for a moment. Vanessa's laughter filled the room. "You see? While you whispered your secrets, I recorded everything. Your humiliation, your weakness, your fortune." Grace's heart tightened. This was not just betrayal. This was invasion. Her private pain twisted into public entertainment. Vanessa stepped closer, holding the phone like a weapon. "Imagine, Grace. By tomorrow morning, millions will watch this. Not as the strong woman you pretend to be, but as the broken one you really are." Grace lifted her chin, her voice calm. She knew what to say. Grace's eyes locked on Vanessa, her voice cut through the room, steady as stone. Your greed is your weakness." The words landed heavy. Vanessa's smile flickered. For a moment, her confidence cracked. Grace went on, her tone unshaken. "You record because you crave proof. You think evidence makes you powerful, but greed blinds you. Every recording you hold is also evidence against you." Harris's eyes lit up. He nodded firmly. "She's right. Unlawful surveillance, blackmail, fraud. You've already trapped yourself, Vanessa." David stared at Vanessa, shock spreading across his face. He had never seen her cornered before. Vanessa hissed, "I'll release it first. The world will laugh at her." Grace did not flinch. "Then the world will also see you, a woman so desperate for wealth she mocked the sick in their hospital bed." The room tightened. The tension was no longer hers to carry. It was Vanessa's. Her smirk was gone, and for the first time, her steps wavered. Grace had spoken truth, and truth cut sharper than betrayal. Vanessa lunged forward, anger blazing in her eyes. She shoved Harris aside, pointing the camera at Grace. "Say it!" she shouted. "Say you're nothing without that money." The phone trembled inches from Grace's face. The lens blinked like a cold eye. But before Vanessa could press closer, Helen moved. Her hand gripped the metal IV stand. With a single swing, she struck. The stand crashed against Vanessa's arm. The phone flew from her hand, skidding across the floor. The lens cracked. Sparks hissed. Vanessa screamed, "You witch!" The door burst open. 2 hospital guards rushed in. They grabbed Vanessa by the shoulders, by the wrists. She kicked. She thrashed. Her red dress flared like fire. "Let me go! Do you know who I am?" she shouted. Helen's voice was calm, steady. "Yes, we know exactly who you are." The guards dragged her out. Her screams echoed down the hall. Grace leaned back on her pillow. Her chest rose slowly. The broken phone lay silent on the floor. For the first time in days, the room felt lighter. The storm had not ended. But one battle was won. The room was quiet after Vanessa's screams faded down the hall. David sank into the chair by the window, his face pale, his hands covering his head. Tears broke through. He shook as though the weight of years had finally crushed him. For so long he had played the proud husband, always pointing fingers, always finding excuses. Now there were no excuses left. His eyes red, his voice cracked. "I've lost everything," he whispered. "My wife, my future, my pride." Grace watched him without speaking. The man who once stood tall above her now sat broken at her feet. She felt no triumph, only the ache of seeing weakness dressed as love. David sobbed openly, his shoulders trembling. He buried his face in his hands, no longer the confident man she had married, but a desperate shell. The world outside still saw him as greedy. Grace saw something worse, a man hollowed out by his own choices. Pity brushed her heart for a moment. But it was not enough to save him. The truth was simple. David had chosen this path, and he could not crawl back from it. The next morning, a folded letter sat on the small table by Grace's bed. David's handwriting, uneven, shaky. She opened it slowly. "Grace," it began, "I don't expect forgiveness, but please, remember I loved you once. I was weak. I let greed blind me. I let lust chain me. I let fear turn me into a coward." He wrote of mistakes. He wrote of loneliness. He wrote of being nothing without her. The words smeared in places, as if tears had blurred the ink. "I don't want money. I don't want Vanessa. I only want us. Please, Grace, don't let this be the end." Grace folded the letter. Her eyes stung, but her heart stayed firm. She had loved him, truly. But love without loyalty was only noise. David had mocked her when she was weakest. He had chosen another woman when she needed him most. And now he wanted her hand again. Grace shook her head softly. "No," she whispered. "Some things, once broken, cannot be repaired." The letter sat silent on the table, an empty echo of what once was. By evening, the story took a new turn. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. Flashing cameras lit up the night. Vanessa Moore was led out in handcuffs, her red dress replaced with prison gray, her eyes still sharp but her smile gone. Headlines spread fast. Vanessa Moore, Mistress of Greed. From luxury to jail. The same public that once admired her beauty now mocked her downfall. The live streams she once craved became proof of her crimes. Nurses at the hospital whispered. Doctors shook their heads. Even strangers online cheered at her fall. David watched the news with hollow eyes. He had chosen her over Grace. Now she was the face of disgrace. Grace felt no joy in seeing Vanessa arrested, only a quiet confirmation. Greed destroys itself in the end. The world finally saw Vanessa for what she was. Not glamorous, not powerful, just hungry. The cameras captured her tears, her shouts, her desperate claims of innocence, but the evidence was too strong. The woman who once walked into Grace's room in red now walked into a cell. The empire of lies she built had burned to ashes. But the storm had not ended. One night, David returned to Grace's room. In his hand, a folded document. His face pale, his eyes wild. He handed it to her with shaking fingers. "If she's going down," he muttered, "I'm not going down alone." Grace unfolded the paper. Her pulse quickened as she read. It was a contract, signed and dated, David's name bold at the bottom. The agreement promised Vanessa half of Grace's estate if Grace died suddenly, if her trust dissolved, if her fortune slipped away. Grace's stomach twisted. This was not just betrayal of love. This was betrayal of life. Her voice trembled, not from weakness, but from anger. "You signed away my future. You signed away me." David's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean for it to go that far. She said it was only paperwork. She said it didn't mean anything." Grace stared at him, her heart breaking all over again. "It meant everything, and you chose it over me." The contract felt heavier than stone, and the silence between them louder than any scream. Grace lowered the paper slowly. Her hand trembled, but her voice was sharp. "You didn't need to kill me, David. Signing this was betrayal enough." David fell to his knees. His tears streaked down his cheeks. "I thought I mattered to someone. I thought she loved me. I was wrong." Grace looked at him, her eyes clear. "You thought you were protecting yourself, but you destroyed us both." He reached for her hand. She pulled it back, her body weak, but her spirit stronger than ever. For years she had believed love was protection. Now she understood. Love without loyalty was a weapon pointed at her heart. David whispered again, "I'm sorry. Please, Grace, don't leave me." Her words cut through the room. "I already left you the moment you chose her, and nothing can bring me back." David's shoulders collapsed. The paper fell to the floor. The sound echoed like a final nail in the coffin of their marriage. Grace leaned back, her chest rising steady. She had lost a husband, but she had kept herself, and that was worth more than any vow broken. Grace thought the storm had passed. Vanessa was in custody. David was broken. The contract lay exposed. But shadows have long memories. One morning, an envelope appeared under her hospital door. Black paper, silver ink. Her name written sharp. Inside, a single message. "You survived David. You survived Vanessa. But the game has only begun. Midnight. Your old home. Come alone. R." Her chest tightened. There was only one man who signed with that letter. Richard Cole, her former partner. The man she once trusted to build her first investments. The same man she cut ties with when she discovered embezzlement. Now he had returned. Not in court, not in public, but in the shadows, pulling strings. It had never been just Vanessa. It had never been just David. They were pawns. Richard was the player. Grace held the letter in her trembling hands. Her mother's voice steadied her. "Baby, this is bigger than greed. This is control. You don't face this alone." Grace nodded. But she knew she had to look Richard in the eye, because only truth could end the shadow he carried. That night, Grace returned to her childhood home. The house stood quiet, paint peeling, windows clouded with dust. Memories whispered through every creak of the floor. Moonlight poured in as a voice broke the silence. "Well done, Grace. You came." Richard stepped from the shadows. Broad shoulders, silver hair, calm smile. The man she once called partner, now her enemy. "You built your empire on kindness," he sneered. "I built mine on fear, and fear always wins." Grace's voice was steady. "No, Richard. Fear destroys. Kindness builds. That's why I survived." He circled her slowly. "Vanessa was useful. David was weak. But you are the prize. I want it all." Grace lifted her chin. "You forget one thing. Pawns betray. Allies endure, and I have allies." The front door burst open. Harris stepped in, flanked by police officers. Red and blue lights flared outside. Richard froze. His smirk cracked. "You set me up." Grace's eyes stayed calm. "No, Richard. You set yourself up the moment you stepped back into this house." Officers seized him as his voice thundered. "This isn't over, Grace. Wolves don't die, they hunt." But the hunt was finished. Weeks later, the courthouse overflowed with reporters. Grace sat quietly beside Harris, her mother's hand in hers. Richard entered in shackles, his head held high, his smirk still fixed. David followed days later, pale and broken, charged as his accomplice. The trial lasted long hours. Evidence after evidence. The secret contract. The hidden recordings. The bank transfers. Piece by piece, the puzzle was laid bare. The jury returned quickly. Richard Cole, guilty on all counts. Fraud, blackmail, conspiracy. David Williams, complicit, guilty of aiding through silence and greed. The judge's gavel struck. The sound echoed like thunder through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled. Cameras flashed. But Grace sat still, her heart heavy. Winning didn't feel like victory. It felt like surviving a war that never should have begun. Richard glared at her as guards dragged him away. "You painted yourself in blood, Grace. The wolves will come." She met his stare calmly. "No, Richard. Wolves fear fire, and I've become fire." Her mother squeezed her hand. For the first time in months, Grace exhaled without trembling. The chains of betrayal were broken. Justice had spoken. The months after the trial were quiet. For the first time, Grace returned home without fear. But quiet was not enough. She carried scars, yes, but she also carried purpose. She called Harris. "Set up the foundation," she said firmly. "It's time the money heals what greed tried to destroy." And so, the Williams Hope Foundation was born. Its mission was simple. Support women rebuilding after betrayal. Fund hospitals where care often runs thin. Create shelters where safety has no price. Grace walked through the halls of the first clinic the foundation built. Children laughed. Mothers wept. Doctors shook her hand with gratitude. The headlines shifted. From betrayal to hope, Grace Williams leads new foundation. Kindness wins. She no longer hid in silence. Her story belonged to others now, not as gossip, but as inspiration. Her fortune no longer just numbers in a trust. It was medicine, food, shelter, light. And in every life it touched, Grace felt a piece of herself heal. The storm had left scars, but from the ashes she had built something stronger. The journey had begun on a hospital bed. Weak, mocked, betrayed. It ended here, standing tall, alive, unbroken. Grace looked at the people around her. Her mother, Harris, the women and children smiling through the foundation's doors. She had lost much, but she had found more. Her voice was calm, steady. Kindness is not weakness. It is fire, and fire cannot be mocked. Her words echoed through the hall, carried by every person who heard them. This was no longer just her story, it was theirs too. She had turned betrayal into purpose, greed into generosity, pain into strength. And though storms would always come, she no longer feared them, because she was fire, and fire does not fall. If you have ever felt underestimated, if you have ever been betrayed, remember Grace's story. Share it, pass it on, because sometimes the quietest people carry the strongest flames. Like this story, if it touched you. Share it with someone who needs courage today. And subscribe so you don't miss the next story where kindness rises again. Grace Williams' journey ends here, but her lesson will never fade.